This is Agent Caitlin Mills. It is Friday, October 15th, 2021, approximately 9:17 a.m., located at 2054 North Bel Air Road, Evans, Georgia, at Mr. Chad Medlin's office, and I'm here with Agent Annie Mormon and Investigator Richard Russell, Richmond County Sheriffs Office. And were you with any departments prior to Richmond County?
No. This particular day started off, office hours and office work. So prior to the stop, it was actually an investigation into a narcotic sales subject. There's some complications with the CI and not following instructions and not following up on what they're supposed to do. Myself being part of that, along with Investigator Brown and Deputy Martinez. We'd set up for a takedown on a quantity of methamphetamine. Some mistakes were made on the CI's part. I was with the CI while some of these phone calls were made. Contact never happened. Shortly after the contact was broke with the CI and the target, this Tahoe was seen leaving that area rather abruptly.
Okay. Investigator
Brown followed it from the area around Vanderveer, up Highland Avenue. I don't know exactly which apartment building or any of that. I wasn't actually there with them when all that took place. Follows them up Highland Avenue and conducts a probable cause stop based on a tenant tag covering. It was an obscure tag.
Before you get there, were you aware of anyone that was in the vehicle or any of the circumstances surrounding the vehicle, anything like that?
As far as, did I know the people in the car?
Right.
No, I had no idea who was in the car.
Okay.
This was a group of people that were in the area where we were conducting our narcotics investigation, and then around the time frame where contact was broke with our CI and the target. I was with the CI while some of these phone calls were made. Contact never happened. Broke with our CI and the target. It is probably important to note that I did overhear the phone call with the CI and the target. Basically, the explanation was he wasn't at his house. He was at a trap or a spot.
But that's not somebody that's in this vehicle?
It turned out to not be. No.
Okay, gotcha.
I said it was very close. He didn't make it to the outside of the car before the taser was deployed. He got up and took that first run, trying to get out into the street, and I was able to deploy my taser before he'd even picked up any speed or got far.
Okay.
The taser was deployed. At the same time, Deputy Gator was able to grab the suspect, and they both went to the ground together. The taser appeared to have its desired effect to begin with, where it did stop his flight, where Deputy Gator was able to grab him and take him to the ground. And by that, I mean, he kind of both went to the ground, cradled him to the ground at the same time, from what I saw. I began to walk over to where Mr. Jones was. I heard a clothing disconnect, and at this point in time, Deputy Gator is on the ground with him, trying to get his hands in handcuffs. So I de-energized the device, or the taser. There was no need for it anymore. Deputy Gator, Deputy Leathers are struggling with Mr. Jones on the ground, trying to get his hands behind his back. And I noticed he had kind of clenched them in between. A lot of this is happening simultaneously. I know it's a long explanation, but a lot of things are going on at one time. After the gentlemen were sitting in the curb in front of me, Investigator Brown began his PC search of the vehicle. So that was taking place while I was watching them, while the dog was being put up. All of this is pretty much the same time. So Mr. Jones got up, and I think I forgot to mention, he kicked his slides. He was wearing slippers, flip-flops, whatever you want to refer to them as. He kicked those off prior to taking flight. So all of this is happening at the same time. I deploy the taser. Mr. Jones, Gator, and Deputy Leathers are on the ground wrestling. Deputy Brown locates a firearm in the vehicle and announces that to the other deputies on scene that there's a gun in the car. What I heard specifically was gun, and that was all that was really processed at the time, was that a gun was involved in what we had going on. I saw Deputy Gator and Deputy Parkers were struggling with Mr. Jones on the ground, but there were also two people that were unsecured, and Investigator Brown was essentially by himself with those two people. Jermaine Jones Sr. actually stood up and yelled out while they were wrestling, trying to get his hands. So I had to divert my attention back to him. I gave him instructions to sit down while utilizing my taser. I pointed my taser at him, just told him to sit down and gave instructions while the taser was pointed at him. And he sat back down, complied with all commands. There was no issue. Investigator Brown took over, kind of watching over them while we still continued to try to get this gentleman in handcuffs. I went back over. They were still struggling to get his hands out from underneath him and get him behind his back. Deputy Gator had took up kind of a mount position where he was able to control the suspect's movement, like at his hips. And Deputy Leathers was able to grab control of the suspect's feet and legs, keep him from kicking, trying to get back on his feet. I came up and took up a position by his head in order to protect his head from hitting anything or bouncing off of anything. And I dropped down to my knees. I placed my left knee just over his left shoulder. I didn't apply any pressure or anything like that to his knee. It was there as a staging point. If he was able to get up, I can transition weight back onto it. But it made contact with Mr. Jones, but there was no physical force applied by me with my knee. Corporal Phillips came over and was talking to Mr. Jones while we were trying to get him handcuffed, giving him commands. All deputies were giving him commands to put his hands behind his back. I even gave him the command. I told him if he didn't put his hands behind his back, I'd re-energize the taser. So all of that took place. Corporal Phillips was actually able to communicate and talk to the guy, looking at the guy, and was like, put your hands behind his back. We were able to get him handcuffed, and as soon as we did, everybody ceased any type of countermeasure. Deputy Gator went back to took all of his weight that he had for hip control off of the guy, and I pulled back off of him as well, stood back up, and shortly thereafter, he was stood up on his feet. He was taken over to the car. The taser probes were removed. There was no sign of injury, no swelling, bruising, anything wrong with the guy. He was able to have a conversation with us. He was sat in the back of a patrol car, and an informal interview where I talked to him specifically about cooperating, whereas basically would make him a potential CI. Mr. Jones had the wherewithal at the time to tell me that, he could find me somebody, but he didn't have anybody that he knew specifically. During that interview, and again, when I have that type of interview, it's not for the crime that was just committed or anything. It was not a Mirandized interview, and it was not meant to incriminate or be used as evidence against Mr. Jones. So it was an informal interview that's conducted off camera while he was in the back of the car. We do that for his protection, so that there's no body camera footage of him, giving up information or giving up somebody that would potentially want to do him harm later. During that interview, Mr. Jones had no relevant information as far as he couldn't provide any names or anything that would make me comfortable releasing him that night and trying to utilize him to further a narcotics investigation. So the decision was made that he was going to take that ride to jail for the firearm charge and the misdemeanor obstruction. There was nothing out of the ordinary about the conversation. Like I said, he had the wherewithal to try to kind of bargain, and if you let me go now, I can do something for you later, which is indicative of somebody that's never going to call you back. Other than that conversation was ended. He was transported off scene by Deputy Gator shortly after that. I actually grabbed Mr. Jones's shoes for him because they were still on scene as Deputy Gator was turning around to leave. I put him back in the back of the car with him, and even then he was trying one more time to kind of hey, let me go tonight. I can, just let me go home. And I told him no, we weren't gonna entertain that. And Deputy Gator took him to the jail.
You go ahead.
You're good.
If there's anything else you want to add, I was just going to go back and start asking some follow-up questions, but if you want to finish.
So after all of the fact, we do our debrief kind of on scene. Since I deployed the taser, I was going to be the one responsible for the use of force. After the fact, it was learned that Deputy Gator did employ some palm strikes to the side of Mr. Jones' face in order to gain compliance. This was around the same time that it was announced there was a firearm involved in the situation. It was announced by Investigator Brown that the firearm had been located, and that's when the palm strikes were employed, and Deputy Parker employed a fist strike to the meaty part of the thigh. I believe it was Mr. Jones's right thigh at the same time, in an effort to get his hands behind his back because they were scooped underneath him.
Who did you say that was again?
Which one?
Deputy Parker?
Parker, yes.
Parker.
Was
Is that his first name or last name?
That's his last name.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Deputy Leathers.
Okay.
Parker Leathers.
So that didn't sound familiar to me, so. Okay,
I'm sorry.
Deputy Leathers.
Yeah, Deputy Leathers.
And you said he. Tell me what one more time.
He used 3 closed fist strikes on the meaty part of the outside thigh. The strikes and portion of this took place while my attention was diverted to Mr. Jones Sr. By the time I turned back around, it was just really a struggle to get his hands out from underneath him. There were no strikes or anything employed. And Corporal Phillips was over there. Me and Phillips kind of got there about the same time. I think I was just a hair ahead of him. And at that point, it was just a wrestling match on the ground.
So you didn't see the strikes happen.
Is there anything else? Do you remember?
Not that
Okay. I just want to make sure before I go back and start asking questions from the beginning. So some of this stuff is just questions that I have to follow up, and then some of it I just want to make sure that I have correct, okay? So you get there as third on scene, and there's just some casual small talk conversation with Investigator Brown and you and the passengers, just about the vehicle and stuff like that. Nothing really significant at that time. But you did notice that the backseat passenger, you said the window tint was dark, was kind of sitting back, like maybe he didn't want to be seen. And then, so at what point did the K-9 get called? Do you remember that?
As far as, you mean when did we call him on the radio?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Well, I guess at what point was the decision made to call a K-9 over there?
So K-9 works with crime suppression and us pretty often, so they're usually readily available to us.
Did CSD and K-9 go 85?
Yeah. Leaving zone 6, so I do not know. I will get there as soon as I can.
Okay.
504 K4.
Got a K4.
Oh, okay.
How far out are you?
They said the tow truck guy's waiting on them because
I am I'm about to pass over Gordon Highway.
Hello?
He's on the phone already.
Alright.
I didn't call specifically for her on the radio.
504 K4.
So I don't have a timestamp on it, but typically we call pretty much as soon as we make the stop, like, hey, head this way.
Okay.
That way there's no significant delay while we're waiting on a K-9 or anything like that. We utilize a K-9 quite frequently in what we do, so they stay available and stay around us.
Okay, so it's pretty typical for once you guys initiate like a traffic stop or something for a K-9 to already be on the way, or you guys just already go ahead and call one over there?
Yeah, I mean, it's both. Like, I mean, there'll be times where I'll stop a car and I'll be, crime suppression and K-9 are focused on a different area, and I have to call them from that area. And there's other times when we know things are happening that we're going to plan on doing together as a unit, where the K-9 is there in 30 seconds. So, but they typically are. In this particular incident that night, they were with us, and they were close by.
So no one actually called over the radio
I
and
don't.
said, hey, can you come over here? She just heard it and thought.
I don't recall.
But you specifically
I specifically did not call for the dog. No.
504 takeoff.
So it was Investigator Brown's initial stop, and Deputy Tarpley went to back him up. The other issue, we kind of worked off two different channels for a brief moment there. We have our own, and by we I mean narcotics has our own channels.
Mm-hmm.
Crime Suppression has two of those channels that we can communicate on each other, and it's not a main dispatch channel where we go through dispatch and everybody in the county can listen in on what we're doing or where we're at.
Okay.
So we were actually utilizing one of those channels, and then we switched back over to the Special Ops Dispatch, which is a county-wide channel.
Okay.
So during that period of time where I was on the other channel and they were on Special Ops, I don't know who called or if they called.
Gotcha. But Investigator Brown did ask for consent to search.
That's correct.
And who did he ask that to?
The driver.
The driver. And which one? So Mr. Jones Jr. was sitting in the back.
Correct.
Who was in front of him?
Front seat passenger was Mr. Jones Sr.,
Okay.
and then the driver of the vehicle is Mr. Willie Baker.
Okay. And so he asked Mr. Willie Baker for consent, and Mr. Baker gave consent for the vehicle search. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And at what point did you guys get them out of the vehicle? Like, was it after consent was given, or at a different point?
So consent was given, and pretty much same time I said, okay, yeah, he didn't have a problem with us searching the vehicle, so we started asking people to hop out the car so we could search it.
Okay.
And simultaneously with that is when Deputy Helco ran her K9 around the vehicle and received a positive alert.
Okay. I remember you mentioning at one point you observed Mr. Jones Jr. While they're still in the vehicle talking to Mr. Jones Sr. Did you hear any of that conversation? Okay.
It wasn't. So he leaned up from his position where he had been pushed into that back seat behind the tent the whole time. He leaned all the way up to whisper whatever it was that he was saying to his father, Mr. Jones Sr.
Okay. And you said at that point you remember him having his phone?
Yeah, he started to unlock his phone,
Okay.
which is the point in time that I went back up to make contact with him and asked him to stay off the phone.
Okay. And so you, Investigator Brown gets the two on the passenger side out of the vehicle, and I believe you said Deputy Tarpley gets Mr. Baker.
I believe it was
Okay.
Deputy Tarpley got Mr. Baker out, yes.
Okay. And then all three of them end up sitting on the curb in front of you.
Correct.
Do you remember at what point you, where on your vest, like your setup, is your taser?
It's on the chest.
Okay. So is it like in the middle, or is it left side, right side?
It's set up as a cross draw, like high left.
Okay, and at what point do you remember getting your taser out?
Once I started noticing all the pre-flight indicators and things of that nature with Mr. Jones.
So you start noticing the different things you named earlier, and decided to go ahead and get your taser out. As like a precautionary, or
Yeah, it was
something
not
else?
activated or anything, nor was it displayed or pointed at anybody. It was down behind my leg.
Okay. And you described that you remember seeing Mr. Jones Jr. Say something or like lean over to Senior, but you didn't hear what that was at the time.
No, it was inaudible to me.
Okay.
No. I was told later what he said.
Okay. Do you recall who told you what he said?
Deputy Gator. I do want to make note of something that I recall from the body camera footage.
Okay.
When I was told by Deputy Gator, he leaned over to his dad and told him I was going to run. I do audibly say, I know, right, I heard that, but it's not that I heard that.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him lean over and all of the other indicators and stuff, which is what I said to Deputy Gator. I did not actually hear him say, hey, I'm going to run, or any of the other, like I said, it was inaudible what he said from my point of view.
Okay.
But I knew he said something, and then flight happened pretty much immediately after.
Okay.
just to clarify that.
So when you're seeing those indicators you talked about, you go ahead and take your taser out, but have it down behind your leg. What hand do you use for your
My right
taser?
hand.
Right hand. And is that the hand that you had it in,
Yes.
standing there? Okay. Okay, and then just walk me through again that time period of deciding to deploy your taser. They're sitting on the curb, the three of them, and you're behind them. Do you remember about how far you were behind them?
Maybe 2 feet, 3 feet.
Okay.
Not terribly far, but not terribly close either.
So do you remember deploying it like immediately when he got up?
So
It's kind of what I meant by that question.
yeah, so Mr. Jones, watching his behavior and things like that, he stands up and slides come off, and he makes that first like full blown attempt at running. We've all seen somebody start to try to take running off. I mean, like everybody kind of knows what that looks like. You know, you're standing still, and then you go and make that hard movement to take off, and that's when the taser was deployed. Right at that first hard movement to where he kind of bent down and started to go.
And you mentioned, do you remember making any statements, any verbal commands, anything like that?
No, all of this took place in a matter of about a second.
Okay.
It was.
And you mentioned Mr. Jones Jr. and Deputy Gator ended up kind of going to the ground together.
Mhm.
How did you see that take place?
So, Mr. Jones, all right, just for perspective, the vehicle is to my right, the Investigator Brown's patrol car is to my left, and there's a gap in between from where he's conducting the traffic stop. That's where everybody's sitting on the curb to the back side of the vehicle. So Mr. Jones stands up, shoes come off, makes the movement, the taser's deployed. Deputy Gator was on the, like in front of Investigator Brown's patrol car. There's a couple of feet between the front of the patrol car and the rear of the Tahoe that was stopped. So the taser deployed and Deputy Gator is there kind of simultaneously. The taser had its desired effect to begin with, and it stopped Mr. Jones's flight, and then Deputy Gator was able to grab and take him to the ground. Like as he was going down with the taser, Deputy Gator was grabbing him as well, kind of cradled him to the ground.
Okay.
From which I believe is what caused the clothing disconnect, is when they kind of wrapped up and went to the ground together.
Okay. Do you remember how Mr. Jones Jr. Like fell onto the ground, like on his back, side, like face first, something else?
From what I saw, like so he's falling, and Deputy Gator's kind of grabbing him at the same time, and they both land. It's Gator's right side and his left side kind of hit the ground.
So do you remember seeing that like initial impact on the ground with both of them?
Yeah, it was just kind of, I mean, it's kind of a grab and
Okay. Okay.
a soft tackle, if that's a way to describe it.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a
Okay.
good way to explain it, but
So you recall both of them kind of being on their side. It wasn't like just face forward or face back.
no, they fell to the, like, when he went to take flight to the right, and as he went to go take off like that, the taser was deployed, so when he went down, his momentum took him to his left side.
Okay.
It continued straight while he was trying to make a turn out to the around the vehicle and down the road,
Okay.
but his momentum carried him straight through, and Deputy Gator was right there about the same time.
Okay. And then you said kind of when that happened, you said that his father, Mr. Jones Sr., had kind of started to get up and stuff. So your attention was diverted from over there.
Yep. So Investigator Brown was conducting the search. He found the gun, and that was announced while the struggle with Mr. Jones was taking place on the ground. About that time, Mr. Jones Sr. also stood up. I think he said something like, "What are y'all doing to my son?" or "Get off my son," or something like that.
Okay.
I don't recall his exact words. But he stood up and was boisterous about his opinion, which is understandable, but we can't. Like, I turned back to him and told him to sit back down while we were trying to get him into custody.
Okay.
And he did. He complied. There was no issues between him or Mr. Baker.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that I have this timeline right. So Mr. Jones Jr. is tased, and you see him and Deputy Gator go to the ground initially. But then your attention is diverted. So how long would you say you didn't see what was happening over there on the
A
ground?
few seconds, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe 2-3 seconds.
Okay. And do you know what occurred in those few seconds?
After the fact, I was told what occurred.
Okay.
Which I can explain if you want me to. Is that
Yeah.
it's the statements. So I'm doing the use of force report, and because of that, we did have to debrief and had to explain what force was used to take Mr. Jones into custody. Typically, one person will do a use of force report. Being that I was the one that deployed the taser, that initiated the use of force in this instance, I was going to take care of all that. So after the fact, Deputy Gator explained that when Investigator Brown announced that he had found a gun in the vehicle, nobody was really sure. I wasn't sure either, like if he meant gun was on him still or if gun was in the car at the time.
Okay.
I know for a fact I wasn't sure. That was Deputy Gator's statement to me, is that he didn't know what he meant when he said that. So at that point in time, while they're fighting this guy on the ground whose hands are underneath him, Deputy Gator employed 3 to 4 open palm strikes to the side of his face. And Deputy...
Do you know which side? And if not, that's okay.
I don't, off the top of my head. I think he told me, but I don't remember.
Okay.
And then Deputy Leathers used 3 closed fist strikes to the nerve, meaty part of the thigh.
Okay.
Also to gain compliance. And this is all kind of simultaneously happening. But this is not what I was observed. This was when my attention was averted.
Okay.
So like I turned back around to Mr. Jones Sr. Like I said, all this happens in a matter of 30 seconds.
Right.
This entire event, like it's not a very long thing that takes place. This isn't a 10-minute ordeal by any means. It's just a lot of things happen very quickly, and at the same time. So it's a lot of detail and a lot of stuff that took place that kind of led us to where we're at.
Yeah. Okay, and specifically with the tasing, do you remember how many times you pulled the trigger on the taser?
One time.
One time.
And it was deactivated. I don't think even, like I said, the clothing disconnect happened when they went to the ground. I know the first initial few seconds, like 2 to 3 seconds of the taser did have the desired effect, because that's what prevented his headlong flight, and Gator was able to grab a hold of him and all at the same time with all this. So when I realized that Gator had his hands on him and they were both on the ground, I de-energized the taser, and just prior to that you can hear a clothing disconnect.
Okay.
The taser gets a lot louder. So it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing if it's loud like that. So when they're all on the ground, there's no sense in me trying to re-energize it and risk energizing a deputy that may have an advantage position at that point or anything. So it was never re-energized.
Okay. And at that point, do you remember what you did with the taser? Like, did you reholster it?
No, it
or
stayed in my hand pretty much until Mr. Jones was up off the ground. He was, I want to say combative is the right word. He was still a little fidgety, even after being handcuffed, kind of trying to get up and trying to wiggle. But typical behavior, like after being tased, you kind of want to move. So got him up off the ground and said he was taken to the patrol car. Once the taser probes were removed, I removed the cartridge and then reholstered.
Do you remember who removed the taser probes?
Deputy Tarpley.
Okay.
And maybe Deputy Gator. The two of them were with him while they were being removed.
Do you recall who actually put the handcuffs on him, like who got him in?
Deputy Gator.
Handcuffs? Okay. After Mr. Jones Jr. Was gotten up and stuff like that, do you remember him complaining about anything or making any statements?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
He never asked for EMS, never complained of EMS. He did make the statement while we were on the ground wrestling with him that he couldn't breathe, but he was screaming that at the top of his lungs.
Okay. So after he's gotten up and stuff, you said he's put in a patrol car. Do you remember whose car he was put in?
Gator's car.
And is Gator in a marked vehicle?
He is. He's a crime suppression unit. He's in a marked car with a cage.
Okay. And after he's put in the vehicle, at some point you have a discussion with him. Was it just you, or was somebody with you?
It was just me, like in his immediate area. So, just again for perspective, the vehicle is stopped. Mm-hmm. Investigator Brown's car is directly behind it. That's both on the right side of the road.
Okay.
Deputy Gator parked on the left side of the road, pretty much parallel to Investigator Brown's car. Okay. So everything that's still going on is pretty much 10 feet away, like all the other deputies and everybody else involved. So I had the conversation with them. They're there, but they're not directly present.
Okay. Were you in the vehicle with him, or?
No, I stood outside the vehicle.
Okay. How did you speak with him? Like, was the door open or through the window or something?
Door was open.
How long would you say that interaction lasted? Approximately, if you don't remember, it's okay.
2 minutes, maybe. 3 minutes at the most. Not very long.
Yeah, so at no point you get into the vehicle with him having this conversation or anything like that?
No,
okay.
I was standing outside.
And what kind of taser do you have?
The X2.
X2. And that's issued to you by the Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
Okay. But only one of the cartridges was...
Correct. Only one cartridge was deployed.
And so I know you said this was around 7 something. Do you remember if it was dark outside, light outside?
It was like dusk going in the dark.
Okay.
So it was dark enough I needed the flashlight to be able to see adequately into the car and all.
And some of these questions are kind of things that you've already answered just naturally in talking about what happened. So some of them may seem a little bit redundant. So you said at one point you heard Investigator Brown yell gun, so y'all at that point weren't sure if the subject was armed or not, so that was uncertain. Okay.
While we were fighting with him, yeah. Or while Deputy Parker and Deputy Leathers, let me start over.
No, you're fine, take it.
His name always messes me up, like even when I'm typing it out in reports. There's a Deputy Parker, there's a Deputy Leathers, there's a Parker Leathers, anyway. So, Deputy Leathers, Crime Suppression Deputy Leathers, and Deputy Gator were fighting with a guy on the ground. Kind of all that happened while his dad hollers out, So like we're split attention, but yeah, like that was going on. We weren't really sure at what point Investigator Brown was referring to.
Okay.
It was later clarified that it was in the car.
Okay.
That was one of the items that was located in the car.
Okay. And the probes of the taser were used, from what you're saying, wasn't a dry stun?
Correct. That deployed
Okay.
the cartridge. The probes were deployed.
Okay. And you said that it was only one cycle, you only pulled it one time?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know if Richmond County has a taser policy?
Yes.
Okay. Are you able to describe that policy?
It's multiple pages. It goes into a bunch of different things as far as like what the taser is, explains what a electronic control weapon and all that is.
Okay.
And then times and places that we can use it. But it's a fairly lengthy policy.
But you do recall receiving training on the taser?
Absolutely.
And the last...
Every year.
Yearly?
Yearly.
Okay. And the last one that you recall was in service last year, you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
My training file has the dates on it, but
Okay.
I don't recall when I went last year.
That's fine. Yeah, we'll be able to look and verify all that.
I want to say summertime.
Okay. So overall, in your own words, what made you decide to use force?
To prevent his escape. I mean, the taser's been used. So the taser was designed as a tool to prevent us from getting hurt and the suspect from getting hurt, and there having to be a whole ordeal. When you full sprint tackle somebody on asphalt, it hurts everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And to prevent him from escaping from where we were at, prevent anybody else from getting hurt, prevent him from getting hurt,
Mm-hmm.
the taser is the most viable option for that.
Okay.
And when he decided to take flight, that's when I decided to use the taser to prevent that.
Mm-hmm. And at the point that he took flight, was he detained?
Yes, everybody was seized the minute the blue lights came on. It's a traffic stop. Everybody in the vehicle was part of that stop. I mean, passengers have a little bit more leeway than the driver of the vehicle at stop, but once the dog alerted on the car, it was for everybody. Everybody was pulled out of the car.
And the dog alerted on the car prior to or after the tasing incident?
Prior to.
Okay.
All that was prior to.
Do you recall any of the officers being injured or anything like that in this incident?
There was no significant injuries
Okay.
by anybody on scene.
And just to verify a couple things, you don't recall being familiar with any of the people in the vehicle, even if it was like something a year ago. You had no prior knowledge of them, even once you learned who they are or anything?
Not that I can recall, no ma'am.
Okay. And then, so as far as all the officers that were on scene, can you tell me everybody that you remember that was there?
Investigator Brown.
Mm-hmm.
No, Investigator Christopher Brown.
Yeah, I gotta distinguish.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. Deputy Leslie Gator.
Mm-hmm.
Parker Leathers. John Tarpley. Laura Hucko. And Aaron Phillips. And then myself.
Okay. And then Investigator Brown is also narcotics.
Yes, ma'am.
And then Laura Hucko is the canine officer.
That is correct. And everybody else is crime suppression.
Okay. And there was no request made for EMS or any sort of medical attention while you were on scene
Not on
that you're
scene.
aware of. Okay.
There was no indicator of any kind of emergency, no kind of injury or anything like that. It was a very. So there's a lot that happened. It was a very quick and average thing that happens. I mean, it's happened countless times. So he was picked up, examined, looked at by us. Pros were removed by us. All that's within our policy as far as taser goes. We can do that. And
So there was nothing that made you believe that medical attention was needed at that point.
Absolutely
Nothing
not.
out of the ordinary.
I still hold my National Registry EMT certs and everything, so like I'm looking at them and talking to them. Everything is just like we're talking now. He was able to answer questions. There's no any type of indication that he was experiencing any kind of medical emergency.
So you have some sort of medical training? Okay. What is that basic EMT?
Basic EMT.
Okay. And you said that is current?
Yes.
Okay.
My National Registry is. I don't have my like Georgia state license or anything like that. It's just a national certification.
Okay. But he was answering questions, talking fine, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay. And the incident was recorded on your body-worn camera?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were there any pieces of it besides what you described, the conversation in the vehicle, that weren't recorded?
What do you mean prior to like the? So it comes on as I'm like kind of making contact with everybody at the stop.
Okay.
Like I'm just walked up and activate the camera, and then it stays on until Mr. Jones is in the back of the car.
Okay.
Even after that, it showed me collecting the evidence off the ground, the aphids for the taser, all that stuff.
Okay.
I do depart the scene briefly. There was Investigator Brown was interviewing or talking with the dad and I believe it's his uncle, Mr. Baker and Mr. Jones Sr. There was supposed to be another vehicle that was down the road that belonged to them to see if there was anything going on with that vehicle as well.
Okay.
I went down there and confirmed, yeah, it was an Impala, has a flat tire that Wayne's was towing and pulled off. It was irrelevant. But that was maybe 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
And then I was back.
Okay.
My camera was deactivated when I left, though.
Okay.
By the time I came back, like I said, he's been in the car. Everybody else is done.
Okay.
And then that's about the time that the conversation took place with him about cooperating. I believe that's the correct order.
Okay. So the only period of time that you were out there and had interaction with Mr. Jones or any of them that your camera was not on was that time where you had that conversation with him about cooperating while he was in the vehicle?
Yes.
And at that point, the door was open and you were talking to him outside the vehicle?
Correct.
Okay.
No one else was in the vehicle with him at that time?
No, he was in
just you and Mr. Jones?
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, ma'am. He's in the back of a marked cage car, like a typical police car that has the transport and everything in the back. So I was standing outside of it, talking to him on the passenger side.
Okay. But you said that there was the other deputies and investigators were still in
They're
the
in the-
area, so
yeah,
that would
they're-
have been visible to them?
Yes.
Okay. Have you given any statements to anybody else in reference to this incident?
Other than my lawyer, no.
And after the incident happened, do you remember when you turned your taser over?
The next morning. I actually do need to clarify that as well. So taser cartridge and all the evidence and everything was collected. He was transported to the jail, and I actually cleared that scene and actually had to go handle another unrelated incident. It wasn't until like 10:30 at night that I was notified. I believe that's the correct time, between 10 and 10:30, that I got a phone call that he was in the hospital.
Okay.
And the only thing that was explained was that basically he had some nausea and vomiting. He threw up.
Do you remember who notified you of that?
Deputy Gator contacted me on the phone to begin with. Told me that he had been diverted to the hospital because of the throwing up. They took him to AU, and that they were talking about admitting him to the hospital because, and again, the only thing that was conveyed was because he was being thrown up. Because he was thrown up. This was about 10 o'clock, 10:30.
Okay.
Deputy Gator wanted to know if we wanted to sit on him in the hospital, and we had a conversation. I told him no, we didn't have to. He doesn't have violent charges. I mean, we can just take out the warrants on him and pick him up later. If he's going to be in the hospital for days on end, there's no sense in tying up resources for the charges that he has.
Okay.
I mean, we have the firearm that he had and all that. So.
Do you remember what kind of firearm that was?
It was a Glock. It was one of the compacts or subcompacts.
Okay. And that was found by Investigator Brown?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Along with a, I believe, crack pipe in the vehicle, broken glass pipe.
Okay. So you learned about 10 or 10:30 that he was admitted into the or that he was taken to the hospital.
Yes,
and to your knowledge at that point, it was nausea and vomiting. Okay. So you had your taser and stuff with you throughout the night?
I did.
Okay.
I came back in, so I was notified of that night. I finished dealing with what I was dealing with. Went home, and we came in the next morning at like just before 8 o'clock for training, and that's kind of when the phone calls started coming down through supervisors and all, letting us know we need to come down to 400, but we didn't really know why. So they just wanted our body cameras and everything down there. It was kind of told that he was admitted to the hospital and he wasn't doing very good, but nothing was really explained until later on.
Okay.
So, but I turned the body camera over, and then I turned the taser and taser cartridge over to Captain Young, who I believe turned over to y'all. I'm sorry, Major Young.
You said that was around 8 o'clock that next morning?
We started getting phone calls at like 8 o'clock, but I'm not sure what time we got down to the sheriff's office. Maybe 9:30.
Okay. So throughout the night, do you remember where you had your taser at?
Well, it was still in the holster on my vest.
Okay.
I was sitting in the back of my car, locked up.
I know we've already gone over how Mr. Jones Jr. was handcuffed and stuff. How was he handcuffed? Was it in the front, in the back?
No, it's back.
And you may not know this, and if you don't, it's okay, but do you know what position he was in when he was transported originally?
When he left, he was seated.
Okay.
Still handcuffed in the rear?
Yes.
In the back of the car?
Yes. Seated, handcuffed in the rear. He actually was, when I put his shoes in the back of the car, he was trying to like kind of move his feet over to put his shoes back on, or slides back on.
And like I said earlier, we do go over your personnel file and your post record for training and stuff. But I'm just going to look back over this and make sure that there is nothing else to hit on. If you have any questions or...
I followed it. Need to clarify so we're good.
Okay. Mr. Medlin, do you have anything?
No,
Okay.
not at all. Thank you.
Is there anything else that you can think of? Anything I didn't ask you about? Significant about the event?
Everything post-event is all hearsay, but
I just want to go back over this and make sure I didn't miss anything. That way I don't have to call you back. With your taser, I know the X2s have 2 cartridges. Did you have 2 in there?
Yes.
But and deployed
A single.
one?
I deployed the first left side cartridge.
Okay. Do you remember if Mr. Jones Jr. had any damage to like his clothing or anything like that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. You don't remember?
No, he didn't.
Okay.
There was no damage that we could see.
No visible injuries.
No, ma'am.
No scratches on
No
his
scratches, no
head,
swelling,
body.
no bruising, no anything, no contusions at all. He wasn't bleeding. There was nothing at all that was.
No torn and ripped clothing. Everything was intact as far as you could tell.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember there being any other witnesses that were out there, like anyone in the neighborhood or anything like that?
No, where we were at was like right off of Highland, and it's like a wooded area.
Okay.
Like there's a privacy fence and some woods for like I think it's a nursery or something on one side, and then like trees and bushes behind us. So we had the road blocked with the cars and all. So
Okay.
just where everybody parks wherever they want to, kind of thing. And so most traffic was diverted down side roads and continued straight up Highland.
And you had mentioned at the very beginning that Investigator Brown made the initial stop for an obstructed tag cover.
Yes.
Did you see that obstructed tag cover?
Yes, the tag
okay.
cover wasn't clear and opaque. It didn't expose the whole tag. It was I don't even know what color to call it, but it was a darker color that you couldn't see clearly, even
Okay.
standing outside of the vehicle.
Okay. I think that's it. If you don't have anything else, you don't have anything else. Okay. Anything else you can think of, or I know it's a lot to go over, but no. Okay. Interview ending at 10:31 a.m.
Now notice the white line. See how it's moving? Now there he goes. He is off the road. Not me. He's paid to maintain lane right there.
Driver's license.
Yeah, what'd you pull me over for?
Failure to maintain lane.
Tell the truth. Tell the
Failure
truth.
to
Tell
maintain
the truth. I got you on camera when I shot you a bird. You made a U-turn.
You can count on continues with the family still looking for answers. Jermaine Jones's family was shown some body camera footage from the day he was tased by a Richmond County Sheriff's investigator. Jones died a few days later. Now, the family did not get to see all the footage, and they say they will not rest until they see everything.
3 weeks after Jermaine Jones died, his family relived his final day.
Just us seeing our child last moments.
Jones' mother and father shown body camera footage by a Richmond County investigator from the day their son was tased. The family telling me they were only shown 2 of 8 videos, and the rest is still being reviewed.
I want to see the whole thing. See the whole thing. See the whole thing.
Hold on. No, can you please take...
I'm
Webster Russell with the Warning Police Department. You have your driver's license with you?
I know exactly where you were. I've been hearing about you a lot.
Okay.
I heard you had a lot of complaints on you, my guy.
Y'all leave. You're illegally parked right now in the roadway, okay? Get back in your car and leave the area. Will Tracy Williams is in custody for felony fleeing to a loop.
I see him. Come here. Come here. Put your hands out so I can pat you down.
Oh, I don't have no...
Relax. I can see both of his hands.
Copy 2312.
You have an ID?
No, come on. Look at
Do
him.
you have? I see him. Do you have an ID?
I don't even... Look at him.
Put your hands behind.
Evening, sir. Deputy Russell with the Sheriff's Office. You have a driver's license on you? The reason I'm stopping you is when you made this turn up here, you were in the suicide lane. How much you had to drink while you was downtown?
second. Instead of yelling, let's have a conversation, okay? Excuse me.
Yeah, folks, I got to use the bathroom.
Yes, ma'am. I tried to give you an opportunity. I tried to give you an opportunity to use the restroom and be courteous, okay? But I have an order of operations I got to go through. Order of operation. Order of operation. Order of operation.
Oh, shit! I'm down! I'm down! I'm down!
Next
I'm
question.
down, okay?
All
I'm
right.
down!
Take your hands at the box for me, man. The reason I stopped you for your window tint.
I know.
You know how dark it is? Are there any guns or anything in here?
No.
You sure?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, oh, by the way, the reason I'm stopping you is your window tint. Yes, ma'am. The window tint.
Georgia CSL 7600 comes back to a 2020 Toyota Camry, black in color.
I must have mistyped the letter somewhere. How you doing?
Open my door, man. Why did you open my door?
Hey, how's it going, sir? Are you okay?
Why you open my door, though?
Because I can. Why are you screaming profanities out the window in front of the complex?
I said y'all can stay out the road. That's what I said.
That's not what you said. You dropped
That's what
a
I
whole
said.
bunch
I
of
said y'all can
profanities.
stay out the road.
I was just curious as to why you're screaming
I'm saying, why you
profanities
open my
inside a
door,
neighborhood
man?
where children
Why
and
you
everybody else can
open my
hear you. It's
door?
called disorderly conduct, by the way. Have you been all through the house?
No.
Okay. What? Who's in? How many people in here?
This gentleman here, he's handicapped, so I didn't move him.
Okay. You the only one here, sir? Are you the only one in here?
I got a messenger in the back.
You said nobody else was here.
I thought you were right here.
No, in the house. Oh. What's his name?
What's
What's his name and how old is he? Alright. So, I have not searched your house, okay? Just so that I want to make sure that everybody understands what's going on, that I'm cleared. I don't want you to think I'm doing anything I'm not supposed to be doing, okay? So, I'm doing anything I'm not supposed to be doing. I'm doing anything I'm not supposed to be doing.